We all have a past, a story that makes us who we are. It's shaped and developed us through our trials and our triumphs. It's a big picture and difficult to focus on any one particular thing. There are so many pieces that fit together, creating truly unique individuals. How God uses those pieces to develop our personal stories is nothing short of amazing. I lived with my grandmother and I was raised in the Baptist church until I was about 11, and at that time I moved with my mom and my stepdad to Mississippi. The change was huge and I did not accept it or handle it well. I was moved miles away from the woman who raised me, and I was separated from friends that I had known for almost most of my life. Mississippi was life-altering in many ways, and as I look back upon that time, I can see it is where a lot of my story took place. It's led me to where I am today, and while it was a very hard time for me, it also led me to some of my greatest blessings. Today I can say I'm thankful for that. In '94, not long after I turned 15, I found out that I was pregnant with my son, Neil. I was in church, I was active in our youth group, and that's where I met my son's father. I never expected to be pregnant at 15. I would be willing to bet most people don't plan on that, or expect to find themselves in that position either. Yet the consequences and actions is the same. However, I knew in my heart that I was going to do all that I could do for my baby, and I was going to raise him myself. A rather large undertaking for a teenager, but not one that was impossible. I am proof of that, and my son is proof of that. Shortly after the word spread around that I had gotten pregnant, one of my youth leaders told me that girls like me don't belong in church. You're a bad example, and at a time in my life when I needed my church family, I was shunned and pushed out. It made life even more difficult for me, and I stepped away from the church. It was no longer a safe place. A few days after Christmas that year, though, I welcomed a beautiful little boy into this world. And I learned what it felt to have a piece of your heart on the outside of your body. When Neil was 3 months old, his father decided that he didn't want to be a part of Neil's life. Thankfully, my grandmother, my grandma, my mom, and my stepdad, and a few other family members were there and helped me. They supported, and because of them, I was able to continue school and to get my GED. It wasn't the original plan that I had, but it worked out. I might have no longer had a church family, and my faith may have taken a direct hit, but I know that God does not make mistakes, and I know He blessed me for that little boy for a reason. At 17, I married an ex-boyfriend, determined to be independent and raise my son. Getting married that young was full of challenges, including ones that I didn't see coming, like abuse. There were hard lessons to learn, but it took a personal tragedy for me to realize that change was needed. In 1998, my grandmother was diagnosed with breast cancer. 6 months later, she was gone, and I was in denial, and it forever changed my life. It colored my view, and I began to battle with anxiety and depression. It wasn't just her passing that affected me, but it was a realization that my marriage was unhealthy. It was physically and emotionally harmful to not only myself, and the reality that it was affecting my son also led me to the decision of a divorce. We parted ways, and Neil and I moved back in with my parents. My independence took a direct hit. I was doing everything I could to not dwell on or think of things too deeply. My mental health was battered. I wasn't sure how to fix it. I'm a rather private person, and the amount of personal demons I kept locked away versus with dealing with them were having a party in my mind that I struggled to silence. I worked long hours. Praying a long day would leave me exhausted enough to sleep. I loved my son and prayed that things would get better for us both over time. In July of '99, I began talking to Jason online. That December, I up and moved to Florida to be with him to see if this would work. My mom kept Neil at first to make sure that things were going to be okay before we brought my son into the situation. Jason and I quickly realized this, so we took the chance and combined our blended families. Jason blessed me then with 2 more sons, Brett and Bradley. They were 1 and 2 at the time. 3 young boys brought more challenges and lessons than we were challenges and lessons. Though we were greatly blessed with these boys, we wanted a baby of our own. Sadly, I miscarried, and it seemed like God had other plans for Jason and I. We take comfort in knowing that our angel is with our Heavenly Father. Even with the knowledge of that, we were still not active in church. We made it through many trials when we had to face them, and life seemed to be going well. In 2007, we moved our family back to Mississippi. This presented many personal challenges for me, and all I could see was pain and heartache and the bad memories. It was like I couldn't zoom in on any of the good memories that were made, and I felt as if I had to face all I had run from. This began my life lessons of not running, but learning to forgive those who had hurt me. And for the first time in about 15 years, I returned to church, my precious family in tow. We became active members and enjoyed going, and I realized there was a big difference between simply sitting in the pew versus living the life that God leads us to live. I firmly believe that God put us in that church for one special person. I witnessed one of our church leaders tell one of the youth that you were unwed and pregnant, therefore you're not wanted at this church. You are a bad example. And it took me back to a time when I was furious, so furious that I stepped out of my comfort zone and confronted this person about it. I told them they were wrong. If the child didn't belong in a church, a place where she should receive love and support, then where does she belong? Where did they want her to go, and why were they shunning her and pushing her out? Just as I had been, I think I was at that church at that time for her. To stand up for her and to call out those who lacked compassion and understanding and forgiveness, which ironically led me to learn to forgive those who had wronged me, ones that had sent me from running because of their pain and their words. In 2014, I was the proudest mama ever as I watched my son, whom I fought so hard for, to graduate high school. Seeing all 3 of our boys graduate was an amazing blessing that I will never forget. I can see these blessings clearly today, but I also see the heartache that often rides shotgun. Our world as we know it very suddenly changed, very unexpectedly. I lost my mom, my best friend, my son's beloved nanny. The blessing that rode shotgun was that she and I had only grown closer as I got older. I had forgiven her, and we were creating a multitude of good memories together. Losing her like that so fast, it sent me into a spiral of depression again. My own health took a drastic hit, and a year later, I was in the hospital. I had lost so much blood due to some female issues that I was having. My blood levels were so low, the doctor told Jason that he didn't know if it. He was surprised that I hadn't had a stroke or a heart attack or worse at the time. That night, I was given 5 bags of blood. But I'm here. I shouldn't be. But I am, and to me that says that God isn't finished with me yet, and I've got a lot more to learn and grow through. After my mom passed away, I realized my faith was stronger than I thought, but it wasn't where it needed to be either. I had a few other health scares, but continued to believe God had a plan for me. As God was lining things up for me, I began looking for my biological father again, searching for a family connection that I had never had. This time I found information and a brother whom I contacted. Sadly, I learned that our dad had passed away just 6 months after my mom did. Jason and I made a trip to Texas in September of 2017, and I met my brother for the first time. And shortly after that, Jason and I decided to move to Texas. He got a job here in February, and I followed him that April. It was all God that led me to my brother and his family and biological aunts and uncles that I'd never met. Moving to Houston has been one of the best things and the greatest blessings for Jason and I. It doesn't mean that we didn't face hardships, But as I mentioned before, they kind of ride shotgun with life. Jason and I are doing great. We were enjoying life as empty nesters. Didn't last long. We have 2 of our boys back home with us. We miss our third one daily, but talk to him often. Jason and I have seen so many ways that God has worked in our lives, like helping us through the hard times, giving us many good times to reflect upon, and showing us that love, faith, and forgiveness all take time to grow or come to pass. The loss of my mom will always ache, but I'm thankful I'd learned to forgive and that we were on good terms. In 2021, one of my best friends was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. I saw her go through pure agony. I had never felt so helpless, but witnessing her journey taught me many lessons about strength in the Lord and fighting for your life, lessons that my grandmother and my mom had also taught to me. I just didn't realize it. Tanya's doing great now. She's 3 years out and only has 2 more to go before her oncologist can say she's in remission. And she and I have faced a lot together over the years. Last year in April of 2023, we were thrown into battle again. Only this time it wasn't somebody I loved, it was me. I was diagnosed with endometrial cancer. Cancer is a word that can cripple you mentally, physically, and all the what-ifs that come with it. While I would never wish cancer on anyone, I am thankful to those that have traveled this journey before me. It is because of them that my cancer was found. Because of them, I sought to find a doctor to make sure I was okay. And Tanya is the one that told me that mine was cancer before the doctor had even called. I had showed her the test results and she knew what they meant. She also informed me that no matter what the battle was, that we would fight it and that God would carry us through it. There were a lot of prayers and a lot of tears. On May 5th of 2023 would be my second surgery in less than a month. Everything was set to go, and life threw us a curveball 48 hours shy of the surgery. The hospital called and they told us that we would have to have $10,000 up front before I could have surgery. Panic, anger, and fear took over me. Was I going to die from cancer because we didn't have that type of money just sitting around somewhere? I mean, full-on panic and fear took root. The thing is, God, He already had it all worked out. You see that friend of mine? Tanya's been that right side of my brain for over 30 years. I'm a very shy person by nature. I do not like asking anybody for help, and I called Tanya. Jason had been going round and round with the hospital because I was frantic. I wanted the surgery done. I wanted the cancer removed from my body. God has moved many ways in my life, and He has shown more times than I can count, and perhaps that one is more vivid because it's so recent, but let me tell you, God moves mountains. Tanya immediately set up a Facebook page. She began to share my story for me. She and I had talked about ways to keep people updated on my cancer journey. What I didn't realize is that she had sounded an alarm and called upon the army of God. She asked Jason to set up Cash App, Venmo, and any other funding app that she could think of. She posted and she shared like a warrior. When I tell y'all that God showed up, He showed up and He showed out. The outpouring of love and support from family and friends and complete strangers was humbling. God placed an entire army armed with love, prayers, financial support, and even more. Because of that army, I was able to have my surgery. My physical life was saved. Matthew 17, 20, and 21, for I truly tell you, if you have the faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to the mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. Tanya reminded me of this verse constantly because she knew the depth of my fear. She had already traveled this road, and my heart was humbled and changed that I knew without a shadow of a doubt that no matter what pathology said, that I am a child of God, and He will always carry me and mine through the storms of life. I told Jason when I was released and healed up that I wanted us to find a church. He was rather adamant about it. He and I were frequently out here in Old Town Spring, walking around and whatnot, and had seen the sign for Haven and talked about trying it out long before the cancer diagnosis occurred. There was a reason that sign stood out. like it did, God was making a way, not in my time, but in His. The end of June of 2023, I looked up Haven online and watched something where they talked about their mission statement and what they believed in. I told Jason, I said, that's the church I want to try. He's a pretty amazing man. He's my rock. He's my encourager. He's my helpmate in all ways, and he's been a blessing to me. And I'd be lost without him. I'm thankful that he was willing to try this church. It quickly became home for us, and in the last year we have been blessed with many friendships and blessed with things like growth group and a women's Bible study. I may not know the plans I have for tomorrow, but my God sure does. He has already written my story, and I never thought I'd be where I am today, surviving and thriving in heavens above, leading a Bible study that I never imagined I'd be standing up here sharing these parts of my story with y'all. But if my sharing shows you how God moves mountains and the molehills in our lives, and it blesses you in some way, then it's worth it. Without God, I wouldn't have the healing I needed or the ability to forgive others, most of all myself. If I can say anything, it is this. There is always hope and a blessing right around the corner. While we do not know what tomorrow holds, we do know who holds every tomorrow. My faith is so much deeper than before. I have rededicated my life and healed in more ways than I ever could have thought possible. In moments of reflection, I now focus on what God has done, and it allows me to see the planting of His seeds in my life. It shows me true redemption and what redeeming love can be. Using me to be His hands and feet and to share His love with others blesses my soul in unimaginable ways. I hope to never stop learning and growing. I hope to see ways to love others the way He calls me to do, and I will forever share what He has done for my family and I.